Assalamu alaikum. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I'm going to start off with a quote by the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, "The parable of the believers in their affection, mercy, and compassion for each other is that of a body. When any limb aches, the whole body reacts with sleeplessness and fever." Throughout our presentations, do keep this in mind whenever our brothers and sisters, be it anywhere in the world, when they're persecuted, when they're suffering, we are also suffering. I'm going to define genocide as it's universally pretty much accepted. So genocide is any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group as such, killing members of the group, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring its physical destruction in whole or in part, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group, forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. It is safe to say that this pretty much describes the genocidal crimes that have been taking place against our brothers and sisters, which we will be focusing upon today. So Muslims are no strangers to persecution and genocide throughout history up until right now. This is not an exhaustive list you see of list of crimes and genocide, and I'm telling you right now that I will not do justice to all this, but it's very important to highlight some of these. So we have the expulsion of the Muslims of Spain, starting from the late 1400s up until the early 1600s. Up until the early 1600s, there was not one Muslim left. And think about this, and at its height in Muslim Spain, there used to be 5 million Muslims that made up Al-Andalus. Just think about that. So we had a Holocaust on our hands at the end of Muslim Spain, and this is actually admitted by a contemporary, a Portuguese Dominican monk by the name of Damien Francesca. He basically called the genocide of the Muslims a Holocaust. He termed it an agreeable Holocaust. We also have the genocide of the Muslims of Cambodia. I don't know if you guys have heard of this, but a lot of Muslims weren't even aware that there was a genocide that took place against the Muslims of Cambodia. This was in the late 70s. 500,000 of our brothers and sisters were basically taken off the map of Cambodia. And now, recently, there have been trials going on, and there have been some of the perpetrators of the genocide that have been prosecuted. We also have the genocide in Algeria of our Muslim brothers and sisters by the French colonialists. And I'm only mentioning when this took place in the late 1800s. Over 825,000 of our Muslim brothers and sisters in Algeria were killed off by the French colonialists. And this is not mentioning the atrocities that the French colonialists had committed later on in the 1900s up until around the 1950s. We have the persecution of the Muslims in the Philippines, which a lot of our Muslims are not even aware of. This goes back to the American colonialists when they ruled the Philippines. There was an incident called the Moro Massacre, where the American colonialists had basically eliminated an entire Muslim village of 1,000. Just imagine this. And these were defenseless men, women, and children that they had killed. And actually, one of the governors, the colonialist governors at that time, was Major Hugh Scott, and he said that he admitted to this genocide, and he basically said that the Muslims there declared they had no intention of fighting. They just ran up to their mountainous village in fright. And not only that, but the American colonialist soldiers who committed this massacre, they took a picture with the bodies of their victims. And you can find it yourself. This is a Wikipedia moral crater, and you actually can see that picture. I didn't show it because it would not be appropriate. Also, we have the genocide of Tatarstan, of our Muslim brothers, by the USSR regime back in the early 1920s. And this was through famine. So basically, through famine, they had killed off 500,000 of our Muslim brothers and sisters through man-made famine. And now, recent studies show that now the number is up to 2 million. And I just want to share, this was chronicled by the Human Rights Watch, where this woman, during this genocide, using famine, this is what she said: "We were forced to repair our own individual tents. We worked and we starved. Many were so weak from hunger that they could not stay on their feet. Sometimes the bodies lay among us for several days. Some of the children dug little graves and buried the unfortunate little ones," which is basically the babies. We also have the persecution of Muslims in Bulgaria. Now, this is very telling. This was a few years before the Bosnian genocide took place. This was in 1989. What had happened was, this is very similar to what's happening to the Uyghur Muslim community in China. They were committing forced assimilations. Thousands were killed. The Muslims in Bulgaria were forced to change their names. They were forced to eat pork, alcohol. What ended up happening was in 1989, over 300,000 Muslims had to basically leave Bulgaria because of the situation. And we know the continued carnage of Palestine and Syria and Yemen, and it goes on. And again, I haven't done justice to any of this, but I needed to highlight this, that we're no stranger to persecution and genocide. As many of you know, this is the map of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and where a brutal genocide took place in the early 1990s. Again, I'm not going to do justice to this in my part of the presentation, but I do want to provide some context to what happened here. So until the late 80s, Serbian nationalists had taken over the Central Yugoslav government. Ever since then, Yugoslavia was made of 6 republics. They started to offer independence and started seceding from the rump Yugoslavia. Bosnia and Herzegovina actually, at the advice of the European Committee, held a referendum for independence. Over 99.4% of the people of Bosnia opted for independence, and there was a 63% turnout for the referendum. After Bosnia and Herzegovina was declared an independent country, Serbian armies had crossed the border, and they went from town to town, killing, maiming, getting rid of entire villages of Muslims. This was one of the most horrendous crimes I had as a young child, a young student at university that I had observed. And I'd like to share some, again, and we'll get into the details during discussion with you, but I do want to share some pictures of tragedy from the Bosnian war. This is a child, 4-year-old, who was treated in the Sarajevo Children's Hospital for burns suffered by Serbian attacks. I want to mention is that out of the hundreds of thousands of people, mostly Muslims that were killed in Bosnia, of them 12,000 were children. There were the Serb nationalists also had set up concentration camps for a slow annihilation of our Muslim brothers and sisters. They were set up in a few towns, such as Banja Luka. This is in Manjaka. These are more pictures of the children victims of the Serbian attacks. In Sarajevo alone, there were 1,600 children that were killed. 600 of them were killed by snipers, by Serbian snipers in Sarajevo. This is a picture of a buddy of someone who fell victim to a Serb sniper in Sarajevo. These are more pictures from the concentration camps. Again, this is in the Manjaka concentration camp near Piridor. That's another picture as well. This is the grave site of the victims of genocide. This actually was a place where the 1984 Winter Olympics took place. Now, what happened was later on in the war, Croatian nationalists also started committing very horrendous crimes against the Muslims. Because this was an attack on the Vitez district, where Bosnian Muslims fell victim to the Croat nationalists. And this was in April of 1993. Now, after I observed this, I said, okay, come on, the world cannot tolerate another horrendous genocide. I was hopeful. I was very naive back then. But lo and behold, we had the genocide that took place, which we all know of, against our brothers and sisters in Burma, which Brother Anwar will talk more about. Before the 1970s, there were 2 million Muslim Rohingya in Burma. And guess what? There's only a few hundred thousand left. Just imagine that. The push and the expelling and the rapes and the crimes they were committing against our brothers and sisters. This is horrendous. And I'm gonna, I want to show some witness accounts of this by the victims themselves. So if you can please listen to them.
My name is Asmatullah. I fled from Myanmar to Bangladesh. When I left from my house, at that time, Myanmar government surrounded our villages. They start gunshots. Myanmar government forces slaughtered our Rohingya Muslim people. My brother was shot dead by Myanmar government. Eyewitness.
অশান্তি হয়নি বর্মাতে বাংলাদেশে থাকছি 10 বছর পুরা দিলে লঞ্চা মারি না মানুষক বহু মধ্যে আর হারা হালরে গুলো করিয়া বরাবর কিলো তো যদি দেখি আর মুরদা খাই না খারি কিলো গিয়ে ডাক্তার বাচ্চা বুড়ি আর লুটাগুলো বাংলাদেশের মধ্যে আরো বসে আরো সাইবল আসছিল আরো মক্কা যা জুলুম করো আরো বড্ডে করি না মারি আরো বিচার আরো লেবল আসছিল আরো কাদের ইয়ান তোরা দিন ইয়ান তোরা বাংলাদেশে তোরা এরিয়া দিন মারি ফেলাই বেশি মারি ফেলাই 200-300 তো মারি ফেলাই বানা দুলনের ওখানে 200 বলে মারি ফেলাই যা জুলুম করছে রেড করছে তুমি সব বলছো বলবো মারি ফেলাই বেড়া ভাই মারি ফেলাই গুলি মারি নাম দিলে তো ভগবান বুঝে না Polo jaro jolo dere malamati gi abar hati na hari are sulo da tu gora si are bedian ho chol chol malamai bo dekhi bar kya gor na bole ekya ai sori gi go zulum gori na bar tere sulo ta sigi ngare ke sulo duk kadi bala ke sulo zulum goji military ge abar gurum mara duk ka jam zulum go jai nila mara leto sarvar zangi দুজনে গুজরাট থেকে দেখতে পাওয়া যায় মানুষ আরো আইলে জামালা দিব বলি তারা খেতে আছে আর কাজাব দিও তারা ডরলে যাবে দাঁড়ি কাজাব দিয়ে আর খালি বল্লা বলে সুরা বলা বলে তারা উপরে পানি নিয়ে যাবে তার বড় জাব দিয়ে আর খালি বলা বলে জাব দিয়ে আর বড় গুলি গাড়ি বলে গুলি মারি বলে দাই দিচ্ছে Nanggal jadi mata gura, baki lemotor Indo jaga gundani hutan to,
Babi matari muda ke atin cici ayu muda ya kita.
Sometimes takata rangnya ketika orang bisa betul lagi ada. Ketika gundu bila ada bermod dasar kiki ini anak kiki mana tu.
Family ada hal yang itu buat lagi. Terus cinta orang buat lagi manusia ni salah buat lagi. Jadi manusia ni salah cinta kita hal yang buat tu manusia ni dua tiga orang kita itu ada buat lagi.
tu sindang lagi je kau kan kau berarti lagi kau guru soal sih ni dia sudah ini sih orang pejawat ada ni orang ada so jadi itu muskil ke sindang lagi sindang yang ada tuan ada itu macam apa ni yang orang ni yang kira salah ni orang kalau kita salah ni orang tu orang kita ni ke dulu tu orang ni macam apa ni
Lagu betul. Hangat dah ni fujian ni ni jangan dah cantik guru tahu macam tu. Aci dia hari-hari apa tu dia arah tu dia ada loja lo tu dah hari ni mana ni arah tu pun ada orang mana tu berapa lo tu kan kata nak ni tiga year ni nak kaya dan kau ni dah kalau itu permat tahu tu phone dari lari ni tu nak tahu permat macam hari ni mana tu kau tu berapa tu kalau macam mana hal berdiri macam mana hal berdiri orang mana hal berdiri orang macam mana orang sini nafsu dunia mana dulu tu orang ni dah maju. Tu itu orang sini dia orang mesti orang cerdas orang itu dia orang berada ni. Ini cinta orang lagi cinta lagi dia. Orang dengan tu bisa sahih orang orang besar orang bisa sahih orang itu orang jangan kasih. Tiada dua kali tak kena ibarat macam nak kerja kerja orang tiada tu bapa kita yang ini. Ni lagu itu tu orang orang kerja dulu. Sungguh guru arah kecil, mungkin arah santu guru dah kerjanya. Aku itu sudah bapa aja.
I know Sister Rukaya will be talking about the Uyghur Muslim situation that's happening against the Uyghur Muslim community in East Turkestan, but I just wanted to highlight a few things I had to highlight. As you know, approximately 1 million are in detention camps. There's mass surveillance going on of our brothers and sisters in East Turkestan. And they do this to residents. So basically, the Chinese regime would hire a resident within their community, and it would spy on 11 Uyghur families. And then once they're reported, and again, they're given incentives for these reports. Once they're reported, cameras are put into those homes. Okay, they're always stopped. Their phones are checked. Their irises are scanned. They're in a very dire situation. And now, what I came across was there was a journalist who visited East Turkestan, and this was back in 2014. Now he wanted the story from the Uyghurs themselves as to what's going on. Now wherever he went, there was the Chinese government had assigned an escort with him, so he couldn't really freely talk to the Uyghurs in Turkestan. But there was some incidences where he got out without the escort. And I'm going to show you that clip where he does get a chance to speak freely with some of the Uyghurs in East Turkestan.
Here we briefly shake our considerable escort and get our only opportunity to speak to a group of Uyghurs without a dozen police and other officials intimidating them. They're farmers seeking work in construction or as seasonal fruit pickers.
Başka işten sıra şey yapamaz.
And what do they think is causing the tension here?
So even here, when we're in a crowd and once you ask people about the violence, what's caused it, the crowd who doesn't want to talk about it, happy to talk about their lives, but they feel obviously it's a bit too dangerous to speak about these things, even if they're not involved. So even just to give an opinion is something that could really get you into trouble.
As for possible solutions,
Bizde tutmayımızı da onu biz desek olmaydı. Yani onu bizle tutmamız mümkün emez. Onu biz yani. Ben de kasap tinişelim.
Aslında mesela
gelmeyiz.
15 yıl bazı millet olsa hem bak ne mi tasvir edilen millet Uygur millet bizi şu. Biz bir de tasvir edilen millet teşekkür.
the reason we've been hindered is to prevent comments just like these getting out.
Hazır Uygur milleti gesel besin bağ. O geldiğini bir adına yüksek. Çünkü bu taptan olmaydı. Kalkanı gözü koydu adam gel.
Bazı bağda ama beraber olduğu dikenlerimizi bize yardım etti. Ne yapacağız, ne yapacağız, bazı
And when might the violence end?
Onu Allah özü bilmesi ben de bir olmaydı. Vaziyet gibi kadarmışlar. O cep doğru cep asap olmaydı.
Vaziyet erkilik yok. Aslında bir şey istiyor.
As you can see, that gives you an idea of how totalitarian state they're in. This was only in 2014. Just imagine what they're going through now with all those internment camps that they're put in. I want to mention is that one of the most horrendous crimes that our sisters have is the massive crimes of assault, as you know, rape that our sisters have been victims of. And contrast this with a time, a certain incident in Islamic history during the Abbasid Caliphate. There was a woman that was captured by an hostile party, and she was not raped or assaulted. She was just put in jail, and she called out for the Caliph's help, Al-Mudassam. And then when Al-Mudassam was notified of this, he went in himself with leading an army to rescue her, and rescued her, just this one woman. And when our sisters in Bosnia or in Burma, when they were suffering, where was their rescuer? Where was their liberator? This is our situation right now. Many of us live in luxury, while most are suffering. And I'm going to finish my part of the presentation with a quote by the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And I'm paraphrasing the hadith here. The Prophet Muhammad said that there will be a time where the Muslims will be easily picked off, just like by their enemies getting together for a feast, and we're the feast. And that's what's happening. We are their feast. And the companions asked the Prophet, why is that? Is it because we're low in numbers? And the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, had replied, no, we're not low in numbers. We'll be a very high numbers. But we will be so disabled that we'd be like a piece of little foam on the sea. And he went on to say, is that because we've chosen the world over the afterlife. Just reflect on that, and we'll discuss this further with you. Assalamu alaikum.